Chapter 21. Jonathan's head throbbed painfully as consciousness returned to his body. He vaguely became aware of leather straps securing his wrists and ankles against a wooden table. Though his eyesight was blurred, he was able to make out several tall, thick, red wax candles scattered about the room. He held his head up as best he was able. He could see his swords and mirrored key shining in the low light on a small round table nearby. He was relieved to still be wearing his white cloak. Even though it was breathable, it was better than being exposed to the uncomfortably cool air. He noticed it was cold enough that his breath was visible. As he blinked and focused, his vision became clearer. There was a large stove nearby with black metal pipes that were meant to draw the smoke outside. Jonathan looked carefully and realized that it had not originally been a stove, as there were welded plates of varying colors and sizes that were patched together. There was no fire or light coming from it, so it stood out as an anomaly in the flickering orange lights provided by the candles. He could not see well enough to tell on what the stove rested or what sort of floor was in the room. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe slowly to focus on any nearby sounds. After several moments of waiting, he decided he was probably alone and that he should test the strength of his bonds. He strained against the leather straps, but was only able to cause the metal portions of the buckles to gently click together. He attempted to yank his arm out, but the straps were resistant to his efforts. Suddenly the sound of footsteps made him freeze. They were getting louder. He looked back and forth, trying to decide if it would be better to feign unconsciousness, or whether showing he was awake would earn him a meal. His stomach growled as though it were answering for him as the squeaky hinges of a door echoed in the room. "You're awake," said a sultry feminine voice. "What do you want with me?" asked Jonathan. Said the woman as she came into Jonathan's view. She was about an inch taller than Kirana and had straight dark red hair. It was an unnatural red, but it was still attractive, and it was tied back in a ponytail. She had fair skin and bright green eyes. She was wearing a tight-fitting set of hard leather armor, and a large black key was attached to a small chain about her neck. "Aren't you a handsome one?" said the woman as she licked her lips. Jonathan turned a bit red and looked away uncomfortably. "How rude of me," said the woman. "My name is Angelica Sterling, and I am the master of the Demon Syndicate." "Syndicate?" asked Jonathan at last. "I'm disappointed you haven't heard of it," said Angelica. "I would have thought the other members of your council would have made you aware of me." "So that means I am your only prisoner?" asked Jonathan, hoping to probe into the well-being of his friends. "Yes, I'm afraid so," said Angelica with a dramatic frown. She quickly turned up the corners of her lips as she looked at him. "But I'm sure we'll get along just fine. Speaking of which, I know that some of my men were a bit careless with your treatment. I hope I can make you a bit more comfortable." She pointed a finger toward the stove, and a huge bolt of fire flew toward it and ignited the wood inside. Though the heat and light frightened Jonathan for a moment, it was not long before he appreciated the soothing warmth. "What do you want?" asked Jonathan. Angelica walked over to the table and picked up Jonathan's mirrored key. "I want you to tell me more about yourself," said Angelica with a smile as she walked closer to him. "What is your name?" "Jonathan Knight," said Jonathan. "You are the keeper of this key, I presume?" asked Angelica. The orange light from the candles flickered off of the mirrored surface of his divine key. He could see no point in denying it. "Yes," said Jonathan at last. "The men that brought you suggested that you replace Joshua Beckman," said Angelica. She gently bit her lower lip and blinked. "Is that right?" Jonathan decided again that he would gain nothing from withholding this information. "Yes," answered Jonathan. I was wondering if you could help me then, said Angelica as she pulled a stray lock of dark red hair behind her ear and placed her hand on Jonathan's arm. The demon master's touch made Jonathan nervous. In spite of her beauty, he would have recoiled had he not been restrained. I suppose if you have not heard of the Syndicate, you may not have heard of the other demon masters, explained Angelica. No, said Jonathan. Well, there are 5 of us, said Angelica. Since the 5 demon lords went into hiding, we have stepped in to give the acolytes guidance. The speed demon master is a lovely young woman named Leslie Fisher. Then we have the demon witch, Miranda Drake. She may not smile as much as the necromancer did, but she is not insane. Angelica laughed softly at her observation. Then there are the boys, continued Angelica. Carson Price calls himself the Demon Prophet. He is an odd one, but he was important to our efforts in Dallas. Then there's the one that worries me, the one that I need your help with, Jonathan. Angelica ran her fingers along Jonathan's chest. He swallowed hard, trying not to show his discomfort. You see, explained Angelica, the other one is a control master. He calls himself Management, even though his name is Jason Torres. I worry that he is trying to undermine what I have built. You can understand that, can't you, Jonathan? But you're a demon worshipper, said Jonathan. Don't you just kill people that bother you? Angelica laughed. Oh, Jonathan, she said, if only it were that simple. But the part about him that creeps everyone out is that he could manipulate people that get too close to him. You know, with his mind control. She waved her fingers as though she were manipulating a puppet to illustrate her point. So how did the demon lords deal with William Fine, then? Asked Jonathan. Didn't they have the same worries? Yes, said Angelica with a smile. I can see you're no fool. Of course, the puppeteer had something of a rivalry with the demon prophetess. She could predict his movements, and she had the full support of the other demon lords. There was also the fact that she was the one that gave William Fine his key after he had pledged his loyalty to her. And this Management has not pledged loyalty to you? Asked Jonathan. Angelica frowned. No, he has, said Angelica. It's just that I think he's hiding something from me. I don't like when things are being kept from me. For example, several days ago I hosted a tournament. Things were going quite well until someone broke in and interrupted. Her voice turned from being pleasant to being low and angry. Jonathan shuddered a bit. At first I thought it might be Carson Price's fault, said Angelica. Why had he not predicted what would happen? Why didn't he? Asked Jonathan. Because he was being controlled by Jason Torres, said Angelica. He showed me that a large amount of the prize money had been transferred to accounts that were managed by Jason. Angelica's voice softened, and a smile appeared on her lips. Besides, Carson would never oppose me. He has fallen in love with me. Jonathan's eyes grew wide. He never thought of demon worshippers having love for anyone but themselves. Oh, it's okay, said Angelica as she ran her fingers through Jonathan's hair. He and I are not an item. Oh, all right, stammered Jonathan. As he was not being tortured, he decided it was best not to mention Kirana, at least as long as Angelica did not try to do much more than flirt. So this is where you come in, Jonathan, said Angelica. This is where you can help me. You and your divine key. You want me to kill Jason Torres? Said Jonathan. Well, when you put it like that, it seems so trite, said Angelica with a frown. So temporary. She ran her hand along Jonathan's chest again. I am looking for something more than a simple contract, said Angelica. I am looking for someone new to help manage the syndicate. I am looking for someone to help me keep warm. She slowly moved her hand down Jonathan's stomach. He decided he had endured enough. "You realize I'm a divine key-bearer," said Jonathan. "Why should that make a difference?" asked Angelica with a smile. "I am not interested in arbitrary labels, as my predecessors were. They went into hiding out of fear. They did not appreciate the value of strength they had built. I am convinced that if we work together, even people that we might not have traditionally considered working with, that we can make ourselves fit to survive in this new world." "Fit to survive?" asked Jonathan with a cough. This was a phrase he had not expected to hear. "I do not understand what that destroyer did," said Angelica, "but it's obvious the world is about to be a very different place. Perpetual darkness and cold here means perpetual heat and sunlight elsewhere. The place where humans will be able to survive will not be able to hold everyone. To live, it will become necessary to prove that we deserve to live. To prove that food and resources should be given to us over the old, the weak, the sick, and those that will not be able to do anything in society anyway. The unmistakable philosophies of the augments spouting out of the mouth of a demon worshipper made Jonathan's mouth hang open in disbelief. He knew that essentially demon worshippers were trying to establish that they deserved more than others, but he had never heard talk about earning or showing merit. It had only ever been taking from others, proving fitness and rewarding success, the entire culture of betrayal. These had been distinctly augment philosophies. "So, Jonathan Knight," said Angelica with a smile, "divine key-bearer, are you going to tell me that you aren't at all tempted to be a part of something greater, of building a new world?" She stood up and ran her fingers through her hair. "Or is it possible that there is something you would like me to do for you?" she asked in a seductive voice. "Something to seal our relationship. Something to let you know you can trust me." "You could let me go," said Jonathan after clearing his throat. Angelica smiled. "Then you'll swear to help me?" she asked. "Well, no," admitted Jonathan at last. Angelica's smile disappeared. "That's too bad," said Angelica. "You know, I could torture you." Jonathan took a deep breath. "That wouldn't change my answer," said Jonathan. "I had a feeling that might be the case," said Angelica. "I can tell you have loyalties to others. Probably your counsel." "I do," said Jonathan as he prepared himself to endure whatever pain his host intended to inflict upon him. "Most men would not be able to resist me either," said Angelica. "You must have a special woman in your life." "Well, yes," admitted Jonathan. "Too bad," said Angelica. "Well, you know how fire demon worshippers do it. Torture or sacrifice." He heard the door swing open. "Bring them," shouted Angelica out into the hallway. Jonathan could not see to whom she spoke, but he closed his eyes, expecting acolytes to bring out a set of brands. It was the method that fire demon worshippers used to torture and eventually sacrifice their victims. Footsteps could be heard approaching, and a red-robed acolyte did bring a wooden rack with a number of ornate black iron brands. The shafts of the brands were not the typical straight round rods that they had been in the ice fortress. They were composed of several square rods that were twisted together and expanded out in places like one might expect to see on a decorative fence or railing. At the end of the shafts, the various strips of iron flared out and attached to the back of the brand. The hollow portions in the brands gave them an elegant look. Only Jonathan knew that their purpose was the opposite of elegance. Jonathan took another deep breath. Sig had been able to handle this type of torture well, but he was not sure that he had Sig's mental toughness. To his shock, additional acolytes entered the room. They carried with them tables with fixed leather straps. "What is this?" asked Jonathan. Additional acolytes entered carrying Lucas and Kirana, who were both unconscious. Their coats had been removed, as had Lucas's shirt. Kirana had a t-shirt to cover her top. Their divine keys were not visible. "No!" shouted Jonathan. The acolytes ignored him and strapped Lucas and Kirana to the tables so that their backs were up. "Please no, please do not do this." "So, Jonathan," said Angelica as she drew out a brand. She opened the door on the stove in the room and stuck the end in, and then turned back to him. "Let's continue our conversation about what you can do to help me."